Hello BookTube, I hope you're having a wonderful June. This video today was really unplanned. As you know, if you've been with my channel for a while, I love to read biographies and memoirs. And I spotted a memoir on my shelf which I haven't read in a while, and I have yet to share with you guys. But I can't underestimate how important it is to the history of memoirs. I would go so far as to make the case that like all the memoirs you have today, the style they're written by the people themselves, very intimate, I think they all trace back to this one memoir back in 1982. And funny enough, I think it's worth pointing out too, I don't expect any of you to have an interest in reading this, but it is important to know it exists. After all, it's important to me too, so I wanted to share it with everybody. And the memoir I'm referring to is right here. It's called The Game by Ken Dryden. So you see in the top here, it's the 30th anniversary. So if they're putting a book 30 years later, you know it must be pretty important and pretty well written. Before I explain why this is so important, the history of memoirs, just let me give you a little breakdown about the man Ken Dryden himself. You see, he was a goaltender, played ice hockey, played his whole career for the Montreal Canadiens in the 1970s. And one thing you need to know about Ken, he's very unusual. Which, if you're a fan of hockey, you know goaltenders are very unusual people because their job is to stand in front of a rubber puck, and instead of jumping out of the way, they got to catch and stop the thing. So Ken, being a typical goaltender, is very unusual in his life as well, and all the things he's done. First off, this is a time you have to remember, it's not like today where a lot of professional athletes come out of college and then go to the pros. Back then, the early 70s, there was no such thing, pretty much no such thing. Like almost no hockey players came out of college. But Ken here, not only did he come out of college, he came from Cornell University, where he was studying law. In addition to being unusual for a goaltender, you know, goaltenders back then were typically like short, like well under 6 feet, and the guy was like 6'4". So right off the bat, everything about the man was against the grind, very unusual. And check this out. Back in 1972, he made his debut for Montreal. He only played 6 games. He won all 6, but he didn't even play enough games to qualify as a rookie. And when they head into the postseason, Montreal thought that he was their best shot at winning, so they started him. And wouldn't you know it, they ended up winning the championship that year. And Dryden here was the MVP of the playoffs. Didn't even qualify as a rookie, but he started off his career as a champion. In the next couple of years, he would win the award for Best Goaltender of the Year, win his second Stanley Cup. Let me show you this photo of him real quick. If I can find it. Excuse me. There we go. Sorry about that. Let me show you a photo of him here. That's him. Look at that hair and the glasses in this photo right here. Does that look like a high performance athlete to you? Certainly not. Now, if I told you what he is, you know, a lawyer, that would definitely be the case. You would definitely assume that. See, there he is smiling there with the cup. Share one other quick photo with you too. Look on this side here. That's Ken shaking hands with his older brother Dave. His brother, this is a fascinating little story here. His brother Dave played for Buffalo, and at the time in the game, both of them were on the bench. They weren't even playing. Then Montreal's goaltender got hurt and had to leave. So they put Dryden in, and sure enough, what do you think the Buffalo coach did? He put in Dave. It's the first and only time in history that two brothers played each other as goaltenders. Look at this photo of myself too. Look at the spectators in the back. All dressed, the hair's done nice, all wearing suits. A different time. Oh, going back to what I said earlier about how unusual goaltenders are, look at what he's wearing. You can see his face. It's not even a helmet. It's just like a plate covering his face. And this guy's not wearing a helmet at all. Say one more thing about Ken too before I go on about the book. Just mention Ken, he's 26 years old, 2-time champion, best goaltender in the league. And he tells Montreal he has to retire for a year to finish law school. Imagine that? You have probably the best goaltender in the league, and he has to take a year off to finish law school. Unreal. Like I said, unusual guy. Incredibly fascinating. But now as to why this book is so important to memoirs. You know, usually memoirs, they're written like at the end of someone's life, reflecting on their life's journey. This came out in 1982. It was only a couple of years after he retired. He was fresh off his retirement, and he wrote this memoir himself. You know, a lot of memoirs they use like ghostwriters. Ken, like he says he wrote this book in I guarantee that's 100% true. He's written a number of books over the years. If you ever read them, it's kind of funny. Like, I hope this translates or what I'm saying well. Like, his novels read the exact same way he talks. It's unmistakable. He's very eloquent, very formal, and even sometimes a bit long-winded, I will admit. So it's unmistakable. He says he wrote this by himself. I believe it completely. So imagine people writing memoirs themselves, an athlete right after you're retired. Once again, very unusual guy. Yeah. His life after hockey was fascinating too. Like I said, I mentioned he went to law school. He serves in Canadian. He served for a while in Canadian Parliament. He's a professor at McGill University, which is actually the birthplace of ice hockey as we know it today. A very fascinating life. It's like to me, this is what an alpha male is to me. Like athlete brains. Like this guy has accomplished so much in his life. Share one more photo with you from the book. In the middle here, these are photos taken at his childhood home. Like when Ken was a kid, his father paved the backyard so the kids can play ball hockey. You see there's Ken up there recently. I should point out too, these photos you see here, these were all additions to the 30th anniversary. A little follow-up, if you will. Some thoughts here. See all like his friends and family are there playing. A whole bunch of kids too. That's nice. There we go, all the little guys. All the little guys down there. That's his grandson up there. There we go. Dryden family all posing with the Stanley Cup. Forgive me, one thing I should have mentioned earlier, some of the content that he talks about in the book too, aside from the fact, like I mentioned, just retired, wrote his own book, but some of the content as well was things people didn't talk about back then. Like, he talks about how, he's on the road playing, he gets home, now he's with his family again. It's kind of a little sad story. Like, when you're gone all the time on the road, your kids learn to live without you. That was, it goes to show you, like, it's not a glamorous lifestyle, no matter how it looks. There's little downsides to everything. Also, too, as a player, too, fascinating, too, Ken only played 8 years. That's nothing. He only played 8 seasons. They won the championship 6 times. And he describes in detail, too, how, like, there were certain games where he was awful. Like, he was so awful, but Montreal back then, they had 11 Hall of Fame players, 11 future Hall of Fame players on that roster. So he can be awful, and they would still win. And he talks about how that weighs on his mind, too, how like he almost felt useless on a team with all that talent. So, a lot of in-depth stuff that, people, really everyone's expected to write about that nowadays, but back then, 1982, people didn't do that. Definitely had a profound influence. Anyway, I hope I enticed you enough with that. I know one of the summer events going on is the summer of sport. People are reading sports themed books. Truth be told, I wouldn't recommend that because there's like a memoir history book. There's a lot of names that if you don't follow hockey, then you're not going to know the names. So I would recommend that one. But if it does entice you, anyone big hockey fan, it's definitely worth the read. They're going to hold their attention very well. Speaking of reading events, I'm watching all your videos. Like everyone's participating in June on the Range. Reread Western books. I noticed too, like I really haven't read many Westerns myself, but especially like the classic ones that take place in the Old West. But to me, the Western is still alive and well as ever. It's a present day. It doesn't have to take place in the old times, the 1800s. To me, there's still a lot of good Westerns today. I just came back from Barnes and Nobles today. I picked up a couple copies. Now, these are 2 books I had read before, but I didn't own a copy, and I wanted to have one. Let's start off. This author, C.J. Box, he started this series, like the Joe Pickett series. Joe Pickett is his character. This is the first book, Open Season, came out in 2006. And Joe Pickett is a game warden in Wyoming. Like game wardens, they're part, like an EPA, they work with the environmental authorities, and also like they're part law enforcement. It sounds like a crazy job too. Like you're out in the wilderness, like you're on your own. It's you, your truck, and your yellow lab retriever. Like you're on your own, and you're counting. You can write up tickets for people hunting without a license, and of course, if they're hunting without a license, that usually means they're armed, and you're on your own, or just like everyday people like fishing without a license. Sounds like a crazy, pretty dangerous job. And what I like about Joe here, like he's an everyday guy. Like he has his wife and his two daughters, and then he's a kind of a not well regarded. Like the others kind of look down on him. They don't think he's like up to snuff, so to speak. And he's a good, honest guy. And this is a mystery series. So like, got to read about his adventures with Joe and his family. And also, C.J. Boggs, he's written a Joe Pickett novel every year since 2006. So it's like every year you follow the family, you grow up with them, everyone's a year older. I think like the recent book that came out now, both of his daughters are out of the house, living on their own now, and Joe's starting to feel his years. Yeah. I've only read the first two myself. Gonna start collecting them and read them all. I love them. This other one, this is the first book in the series as well by Craig Johnson. The first book is called The Cold Dish. And the main character is Walt Longmire. That name sounds familiar to you. This character, Walt Longmire, was adapted into a Netflix series, as you can see the little sticker on there. I remember back in the day, that show started off on the network A&E for a few years. Then they dropped it, and Netflix picked it up, kept it going a little while longer. So yeah, this is another novel. This has been going on for like well over 10 years too. Once again, each year the new Walt Longmire novel comes out. We get to catch up with him. And ironically, like just like Joe Pickett, Walt is also in Wyoming, and he's a sheriff. This book was fascinating too. The great title, The Cold Dish, as in like the old saying, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." There you go. That's actually the opening line of the book. So this one, Walt, is an old case. It involves like he has a good friend, Henry Standing Bear. Henry's niece was a victim of a rape, and essentially like the guys who did it to her got off, and the case was thrown out. And this has like haunted Walt for a number of years now. And the book starts off, one of those exonerated rapists is found dead. So people are thinking like someone's coming back to try and take revenge. That's the title of The Cold Dish. But who? We don't know. Let's see. Fascinating read. I was a big fan of the show myself, and I've only read like the first 3 of these novels. I enjoyed them all. I'll plan on reading them all. I've got to catch up one at a time. And I'll leave you with that, folks. I hope you enjoy the rest of your June. I'll probably see you at the end of the month again with my June wrap-up. Take care, everyone, and happy reading.